You're listening to Static Whisper Stories. What you're about to hear isn't a ghost story. It's something quieter and much harder to shake. Before I begin, I want you to understand something. What you're about to hear is not a ghost story. There are no monsters, no supernatural forces, no unexplained entities creeping through the dark. What makes this story terrifying is that everything in it has a perfectly rational explanation, right up until the moment it doesn't. These are the recovered journals of the Vostok 7 Climate Research Station, located approximately 340 kilometers from the nearest human settlement in the Sakha Republic of Siberia. 6 researchers, 11 days of silence, and a set of handwritten journals that the recovery team described in their official report as, and I'm quoting directly here, inconsistent with the mental states of the individuals we recovered. I'll let you decide what that means by the end. The Vostok 7 station was established in 2019 as a joint European-Russian initiative to monitor permafrost degradation, the slow thawing of ancient ground ice that scientists consider one of the quieter catastrophes of our era. The 6-person winter team arrived on October 3rd. Their names, as listed in the pre-deployment briefing, were Dr. Maren Solberg, glaciologist, Norway. Team lead Dr. Pavel Grishin, geophysicist, Russia. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, environmental data analyst, Japan. Finn Breuer, field technician and equipment specialist, Germany. Sofia Delgado, meteorologist, Spain. James Okafor, communications and logistics officer, UK. 6 people, 1 station, 120 days plan. They went silent on day 23 of the deployment. Contact was reestablished on day 34. What happened in those 11 days is what I'm going to tell you now. Through the journals, the recovery team found, sealed in a waterproof case beneath the station's main floor panel, the kind of case you'd use to preserve something you believe needed preserving. Dr. Maren Solberg's handwriting is precise and economical. Her first journal entry reads the way a scientist writes: clipped, factual, efficient. Arrived 14:20 local. Temperature -31. Station systems nominal. Team settled without incident. Pavel has already complained about the coffee. Some things are consistent across latitudes. The early entries from all 16 members follow this pattern. Finn catalogs equipment. Sophia logs weather data with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely loves meteorology. James tests communication arrays twice daily and notes each successful transmission like a small personal victory. For the first 3 weeks, the journals read like the most boring reality television show ever produced. And that's exactly what makes what comes next so difficult to process. Because when the ordinary is documented in that much mundane detail, you notice with terrible precision the exact moment it stops being ordinary. It was Yuki who first mentioned the sound. Her entry for October 6th begins normally. Data processing notes, a description of a surprisingly clear sky, a mention that she'd been video calling her daughter in Osaka. Then, near the bottom of the page, almost as an afterthought, strange low-frequency vibration tonight. Not wind, not mechanical. Comes from below the east side of the floor. Pavel says it's gas migration, perfectly normal in active permafrost zones. He's probably right. It just doesn't sound like something that's moving through rock. It sounds like something that's moving toward something. Pavel's journal from the same date mentions no vibration at all. Finn's journal mentions it. Briefly, Yuki asked me to check the east floor sensors. Nothing unusual registering. Told her the ice does strange things out here. She didn't look convinced. That's the first discrepancy. Small, easy to explain. Yuki heard something. Pavel and Finn didn't register it instrumentally. Stress, hypersensitivity, the psychological weight of isolation in an environment this remote. All reasonable explanations. The reasonable explanations get harder to hold on to as the days continue. By day 6. 3 of the 6 team members had independently noted the sound. Sophia described it in her meteorological log, which she'd apparently begun using as a personal journal alongside her official records, as a tone that isn't quite a tone, more like the idea of a frequency. You feel it in your back teeth. James wrote simply, "Something under the ice is rhythmic." I don't know what that means. I don't want to think too hard about what that means. Dr. Maren Solberg, the team lead, did not mention the sound in her day 6 entry. She mentioned something else. Pavel called me by Yuki's name this morning. He corrected himself immediately and laughed. We all laughed. It was funny. I'm writing it down because I don't know why I'm writing it down. I write things down when they feel like they might matter later. It probably doesn't matter. She was right to write it down. This is where the journals change, not dramatically, not all at once. If you were reading through them casually, you might not notice immediately. But when the recovery team laid all 6 journals side by side and began cross-referencing entries by date, they found something that stopped the debrief cold. On day 7, 2 of the journals had the author's name crossed out at the top of the entry, not scribbled over, not angrily removed, crossed out with a single deliberate line, the way you might correct a minor clerical error, and a different name written above it in the same handwriting. Finn Breuer's day 7. Entry begins with his name crossed out, and Pavel written above it. Sophia Delgado's day 7. Entry begins with her name crossed out, and Maren written above. The content of both entries is otherwise unremarkable. Weather observations. Equipment notes. A mention of what they had for dinner. When the recovery team asked Finn about the name change during the debrief, he stared at the journal for a long moment and said, "I remember writing that. I remember meaning to write my name. I don't remember why I wrote his." The radio went silent on October 10th. James's final transmitted communication, logged at 9:47, was a standard systems check. Nominal, routine. Nothing in his voice or his words suggested anything was wrong. Then nothing. For 11 days. His journal for day 8. Written, they believe, after the last transmission, is the most technically coherent entry of any journal from this period. James was methodical. He diagnosed the communication failure, ran the backup systems, documented every step. His troubleshooting log reads, like a man fully in control of his professional responsibilities. Until the last paragraph. Asterisk, I've run every check twice. The equipment is functioning. The signal is going out. Something is absorbing it between here and there. I know that's not how radio works. I'm writing it down anyway, because I write things down when they feel true, even when I know they're not. Marin says that's not a useful quality in a communications officer. Marin is right. Also, I need to note, and I'm noting this as clearly as I can, that I have been awake for approximately 31 hours, and I believe the others may be sleeping more than is normal. I can hear Yuki's voice from the East Room, but when I go in, it's empty. I'm going to sleep now. My name is James Okafor. I'm writing that because it felt important to write it. By day 9, 4 of the 6 journals had the name swap at the top of entries. The pattern was not random. Each person had crossed out their own name and written the name of one specific other team member, always the same substitute name, consistently across multiple days. It wasn't rotating confusion. It was as though each person had quietly decided, on some level below conscious thought, that they were someone else, and then continued their day entirely normally. Dr. Marin. Solberg's Day 9 entry is the longest she wrote during the entire deployment. It begins with her name intact, no crossing out, which made the recovery team believe she was the most cognitively stable of the group by this point. She writes, I want to document what I'm observing clearly and without embellishment, because I am a scientist, and this is what I do. Over the past 3 days, I have noticed the following. Pavel refers to himself in conversation as Finn, but does not notice when I use his correct name. Yuki has begun responding to Sophia's name with more immediacy than her own. Finn asked me yesterday where he had put his gloves, and looked confused when I asked who he was. He said, me. I meant me, but he'd said he. I don't think this is a pathological crisis. I think the isolation and the sensory, monotony and the sleep disruption have combined into something. That is eroding the peripheral markers of identity, the small daily confirmations that remind you which self is yours. In an environment with no external mirrors, no social performance, no one to perform for, the self becomes less insistent. I'm fine. I'm documenting this because it's scientifically interesting and because I'm fine. I'm fine. My name is Marin. The word Marin at the end of that entry is written larger than the rest. The pen pressed harder into the page. Yuk. I stopped writing in Japanese on day 10. Her earlier entries had been bilingual, Japanese on the left side of the page, English on the right, a habit she'd developed to keep her data notes separate from her personal observations. On day 10, the Japanese stopped entirely. Her entry is fully in English, and the handwriting is different. Not dramatically, but measurably. Smaller letters. More pressure. A slight rightward slant that her earlier writing didn't have. The name at the top of the entry reads Sophia. The content of the entry describes, in precise meteorological language, a pressure system moving in from the northwest. Yuki was an environmental data analyst. She had no meteorological training. The observations she recorded on day 10 were accurate. Sophia's day 10 entry describes a dream about her childhood home in Valencia, written in handwriting that the recovery team noted bore a resemblance to Yuki's earlier bilingual entries. Sophia's name at the top of her Day 10 journal had been crossed out. Above it, in careful letters, Yuki. We don't have a complete picture of Day 11. 3 journals have no entry for that date. Not torn pages, just the blank space of a day that nobody recorded. As though all 3 of those individuals existed on October 13th without feeling the impulse to document themselves at all. Pavel's journal for Day 11 is a single line. The sound stopped. James's Day 11 entry, written in handwriting he later could not confirm was his own, says, I think I know what the sound was doing. I think it was the same frequency that the brain uses to maintain the boundary between self and not self. I think prolonged exposure disrupts that boundary, the way prolonged cold disrupts the boundary between frozen and thawed. I think this is a perfectly natural geophysical process. I think we will be fine. I think the entry ends there. Mid-sentence. The name at the top of James's Day 11 journal is his own, unaltered. But beneath the entry, at the bottom of the page, 6 names are written in a column in his handwriting. All 16 members, in alphabetical order, with small check marks beside each one. The recovery team could not determine what the check marks meant. James, when asked, said he didn't remember writing them. The recovery team arrived by helicopter on October 21st, day 34 of the deployment, 11 days after communication was lost. They found all 6 researchers alive, physically healthy. No signs of frostbite, malnutrition, or injury beyond the minor effects of disrupted sleep. The station was immaculate, perhaps more organized than it should have been. Equipment was running. Heat was on. The 6 team members were seated in the main room together, not doing anything. Seated together in silence in a way the lead recovery officer described in his personal debrief notes as not the silence of people who have run out of things to say, the silence of people who no longer feel the need to say things separately. When the recovery officer asked Dr. Marin Solberg, team lead, apparently the most coherent, whether everyone was all right, she looked around at the other 5 before answering. We're fine, she said. We were a little confused for a few days, but we sorted it out. He asked her to clarify what she meant by confused. She smiled and said, You know when you wake up and for a second you don't know where you are? It was like that. For a few days. But longer. The recovery officer noted that when he introduced himself by name, all 6 researchers responded to his name simultaneously, as though each one had equally recognized it as their own. He wrote in his personal notes, I don't know what happened here. The journals are disturbing, but the journals can be explained. What I can't explain is the way they looked at me. Not 6 people. One thing looking at me from 6 directions. The official report attributed the psychological disturbances to a combination of factors: prolonged isolation, sensory deprivation, disrupted circadian rhythms due to polar light conditions, and possible low-frequency infrasound produced by natural permafrost gas venting. a phenomenon documented in other Arctic studies as capable of producing feelings of dread, unreality, and dissociation. All 6 researchers were cleared for return to active duty within 4 months. Dr. Pavel Grishin returned to Moscow and resumed teaching at his university. His colleagues noted he had become a better listener than before, patient in a way that felt almost too patient, like someone who had learned to wait. Tanaka returned to Osaka. Her daughter, in a social media post she later deleted, wrote that her mother sometimes answered to other people's names without seeming to notice. James Okafor resigned from fieldwork. In an interview with a science podcast, he was asked what he would say to people who believe the Vostok 7 incident had a supernatural explanation. He thought about it for a long moment and said, "I think the scariest thing isn't that something got into us. The scariest thing is how easy it was to leave. The self, yourself, is much more loosely held together than you think it is. All it took was 11 days of nothing. 11 days of the same environment, the same 6 faces, the same sounds, no outside world reminding you which one was you. And then we just softened into each other." He paused. "The thing I still think about, the thing I'll always think about, is that it didn't feel like losing something. It felt like relief." The journals are currently stored in a climate archive facility outside Helsinki. They are not classified. They are not restricted. Anyone with the right institutional access can request to read them. Very few people do. The ones who have tend not to talk about it afterward. Not because they've been asked to stay silent. Just because, according to one archivist who spent 3 days cataloging the collection, after you read them, you're not entirely sure whose words you'd be using to describe them. That's where the official record ends. 11 days. 6 people. And something in the ice that knew, somehow, that identity isn't a locked door. It's a habit. And habits, given enough silence, are very easy to break. If this story stayed with you, it was designed to. Not because of monsters or jump scares, but because of something true buried inside it. The self is maintained daily by the world around it reflecting it back. Take away the mirrors long enough, the people who know your name, the routines that remind you of your history, the noise of a world that needs you to be specifically you, and something underneath begins to loosen. Sleep well tonight. And if you wake up tomorrow, and for just a moment before the world reminds you you're not sure which one you are, that's normal, probably.